these things just automatically come on. That'd be so great if things just automatically. Don't count on me remembering things. Okay, so we're in 2 Kings chapter 13, reading about Jehoahaz. Verse 1. In the 23rd year of Joash, the son of Ahaziah, king of Judah, Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, okay? Jehoahaz, the son of Jehu, became king over Israel in Samaria and reigned 17 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord and followed the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who had made Israel sin. He did not depart from them. Then the anger of the Lord was aroused against Israel, and he delivered them into the hand of Hazael, king of Syria, and into the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, all their days. So Jehoahaz pleaded with the Lord, and the Lord listened to him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, because the king of Syria oppressed them. Then the Lord gave Israel a deliverer, so that they escaped from under the hand of the Syrians, and the children of Israel dwelt in their tents as before. Nevertheless, they did not depart from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, who had made Israel sin, but walked in them, and the wooden image also remained in Samaria. For he left of the army of Jehoahaz only 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, 10,000 foot soldiers, for the king of Syria had destroyed them and made them like the dust at threshing. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoahaz, all that he did, and his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Jehoahaz rested with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria. Then Joash, his son, reigned in his place. And again, I know I made this point before. These kings who have the same names or very similar names cause all sorts of confusion. And so his son is Joash, otherwise known as Jehoash, just for the sake of saying it. All right, this is not the Joash who's king of Judah. This is Jehoash who's king over Israel. So not too much really to say about Jehoahaz, other than he pleads with the Lord, and what does the Lord do? Like, he's merciful. That's, and he's merciful, and yet what do they continue to do? They continue to sin. And one of the great tests that we have is, how do we react when the Lord is merciful? When the Lord is merciful and graceful, and we don't deserve it. We know we don't deserve it. And the Lord's like, okay, he's cried out to me. He's pleaded with me. The Lord listened to him. He saw the oppression of Israel. And so, nonetheless, they didn't depart from the sins that they were committing. And so it's a great test, like, how do we react to the Lord's grace and mercy? And frankly, what this is, I was talking with someone, and we were talking from John chapter 3, Nicodemus being born again. And I was like, put it in your own words. Here Nicodemus is an old man. And, the Lord starts talking about being born again. And he's like, what is he really, what's he saying? What's, in your own words? And the person said, well, it's like a clean slate. Like, yeah. And it's like, you get a second chance. you have a second chance. And now the question is what? What are you going to do with that chance? Are you going to keep doing the same things? Or are you actually going to change? And sadly, most people, what will they not do? Yeah, most people don't change. And it's sad, but that's the test. It's like, how do we, when the Lord is merciful, will we respond to that mercy in kind, and will we change? Any questions or comments? Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Well, we always have to look at God loves us so much.
Mm-hmm.
And God really, He will forgive us all the way up to the day we die if we repent. But we must.
Yeah.
It's not forgive.
Right. And it's we have to turn to Him. And with whatever time we have left, it's like we need to be faithful. If that's a few moments, if that's a few years, it's like whatever it is, the Lord is merciful. But you can tell, when the Lord is displeased, and it's a pretty interesting figure there, when he's punishing Israel, and you look at how many people are left, or, in the army, and how much equipment they have left. And all of a sudden they only have 50 horsemen. It's like, over all of Israel? 50 horsemen, 10 chariots, and 10,000 foot soldiers, because the king of Syria had made them like the dust at threshing. And that's a pretty interesting picture, like the dust at threshing. So what that's like. So when the basement, all that issue with the basement, the basement fiasco of 2026. So one of the things that we did, sprayed it down with vinegar to try to neutralize what was there, and then ended up coating everything with about 40 pounds of baking soda, trying to absorb that odor. So just imagine Johnny going around with a kitchen sifter, Now imagine what that looked like when you have 40 pounds of baking soda over everything. And you don't have to imagine. If you go down and you look on the tables and the desks and everything, and what do you see everywhere? And it's like there's, dust and powder. And I know, Michael, I was wondering out in the parking lot what the white stuff was on Sunday. It's because it was all in the trash and Michael was taking it out. And it's, anyway. And so just as I was reading that, I was visualizing that. It's like, what did the king of Syria make them like? Like the dust at the threshing floor. What must the dust have been like at the threshing floor when they're beating out the wheat? And it's like, and it's just everywhere. And that's the point. It's scattered. It's scattered. And that's Jehoahaz. One of the things about Jehoahaz, so he does plead with the Lord, but most of the commentators take the view that the mercy that was shown him, because of things that are said in the coming verses, they take the view that the mercy was actually shown during Jehoahaz's son's time. Maybe, maybe not. I'll tell you right now, chapter 13, when you go through and read it, just read the whole thing. It's arranged a little oddly. What I mean by that is verse 13 is, so Joash rested with his fathers. Then Jeroboam sat on his throne and Joash was buried in Samaria. Okay. But the next passage is about the death of Elisha, and Elisha's talking to a certain king. And that king happens to be, according to verse 14, Joash. So it's like, wait a minute, what? So that's why I say the whole chapter is arranged a little oddly, because it just talked about Joash dying, and yet then it backs up and it's like a flashback to some point in his life. So take that for what it's worth, because of something that's said in these coming verses, and we'll read it eventually, that perhaps the mercy that was shown Jehoahaz more pertained to his son than him. Any questions or comments so far? Like I said, there's not too much to say about Jehoahaz. Now let's read on then. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, okay, so we're still in the time of Joash, the king of Judah, all right? It's towards the end of his reign, but that's where we are. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, became king over Israel and Samaria. He reigned 16 years. He did evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel sin, but walked in them. Now the rest of the acts of Joash, all that he did, and his might, with which he fought against Amaziah, king of Judah, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the kings of Israel? So Joash rested with his fathers, then Jeroboam sat on his throne, and Joash was buried in Samaria with the king of Israel. I wonder if one of the reasons that things are arranged a little oddly here is because, we made this point before, 1st and 2nd Kings pretty much pertains to both the kings of Judah and Israel. Chronicles, on the other hand, pertains more to the kings of Judah. Now, hold on just a second, Rudy, before I forget it. So because of that, when you go up to Chronicles, you're not going to read about a lot of the prophets who were serving in Israel, because Chronicles is focusing on Judah. So if you want to read about Elisha, where do you got to read about it? You got to read about it in the Kings. Okay? And anytime Israel and Judah are at odds with one another, then you'll see it in the Chronicles, as we'll see in just a moment. Because what it just said about this guy, Jehoash, it talked about all his might with which he fought against Amaziah, king of Judah. We'll read that here in a second. Rudy, what were you going to say a second ago?
In verse, I think it's verse 10 here, they're talking about Joash, the king of Judah, but when they're talking about the death of Elisha, it's Joash, the king of Israel. Israel is the northern kingdom, right?
Israel is the northern kingdom, yeah.
Right. So it's
So in the
two different Joashes that they're dealing with.
correct. So to look at our chart, and I think that's why there in verse 10, in the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, became king over Israel. I think that's why they put the Jehoash, to try to differentiate them a little bit. So to look on our chart, so Joash in Judah down south reigns till 796 BC. Jehoash up north is going to come to the throne in 798. So there's a 2-year overlap where they're both in power. Joash down south and Jehoash up north. I mean, it's like, who was the guy who had the grill, the boxer? George Foreman. All his kids were named George. It's like, well, in some ways that simplifies it. Because he doesn't have to remember their names, right? Well, it's like, well, that would make it a whole lot easier if just all the kings were named Joash. Well, in some ways it would make it easier because you just have to remember one name. But if you tried to say, much like, what's the boxer's name again? George Foreman. If he's like, hey, George, over here. Every kid is thinking, what? Who are you talking to? So, I mean, so it's like, it becomes a little confusing, needless to say. All right, so Jehoash is king over Israel. Elisha is prophet in Israel. Okay? All right, so Joash down south, that's so verse 13. So Rudy, is your point verse 13 must be talking about that it's not backwards, it's talking about the Joash down south, that he dies. Clear as mud.
Yeah, except where it says that the book of the Chronicles of the Kings of Israel, so that they include Judah and the north in this book of Chronicles, I don't.
So because he fights with Amaziah, that is in Chronicles. However, more than once, Rudy, it will say that same thing. Is it not recorded in the book of Chronicles? For example, in chapter 13, verse 8, just talking about Jehoahaz, it says the same thing. And if I remember correctly, he's not mentioned in the Chronicles. It's one of those deals. And it's like, okay. Anyway, so it's discombobulating. I don't know what the Hebrew word would be for discombobulating, but you get the idea. Okay, so, yes. All right, so Jehoash is king up north. It's just described him as evil in the sight of the Lord, verse 11, right? And all the rest. So, and then you have the other two verses. Now verse 14, and this is the odd part. Elisha had become sick with the illness of which he would die. Then Joash, the king of Israel, right? So we're not talking about Joash, the king of Judah. We're talking about Jehoash. That's who we're talking about. Okay, so Joash, the king of Israel, came down to him and wept over his face and said, "Oh, my father, the chariots of Israel and their horsemen. And Elisha said to him, take a bow and some arrows. So he took himself a bow and some arrows. And then he said to the king of Israel, put your hand on the bow. So he put his hand on it, and Elisha put his hands on the king's hands. And he said, open the east window. So he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot. And he shot. And he said, the arrow of the Lord's deliverance and the arrow of deliverance from Syria, for you must strike the Syrians at Aphek till you have destroyed them. And then he said, take the arrows. So he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground. So he struck 3 times and stopped. And the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times. Then you would have struck Syria till you had destroyed it, but now you will strike Syria only 3 times. Then Elisha died, and they buried him, and the raiding bands from Moab invaded the land in the spring of the year. And so it was, as they were burying a man, that suddenly they spied a band of raiders, and they put the man in the tomb of Elisha. And when the man was let down and touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood on his feet. There's a few different things in there that are kind of, wanted your thoughts on it. One is Joash, the king of Israel, and this is Jehoash, who's described as evil in the sight of the Lord. When Elisha is dying, he comes and he weeps over Elisha. And the question is, how do you, I don't know what's the word I'm looking for. Why does he weep? How do you get those two things? He's described as evil, and yet he's weeping over Elisha, the man of God. How do you get those two ideas not to contradict one another? He's evil, but he's weeping over Elisha.
Even an evil person can understand a good man.
Yeah. I think so. And it's, yes, he did evil. Just because someone may be evil, but that doesn't mean they don't have any feelings, conscience on some level. And like you said, to recognize a good man. I don't, I'm not sure if we really know why he's evil, to kind of get into like those motivations, if you want to say that. But there's something in him that causes him to weep over Elisha. And that's a good thing. And then you have the whole conversation between Elisha and him, because God's ready to discipline Syria. And then you have the whole arrows and the striking of the ground and all of that. But it's just an interesting thing that here you have, and I don't want to flippantly say, well, a broken clock is right twice a day. I don't think it's that. There's more to it than that. And that even he appreciated Elisha. Contrast that. Do you remember when Elijah talks to Obadiah and says, I'm going to meet Ahab? Do you remember when Elijah shows up to Ahab? Do you remember what Ahab calls him?
Trouble.
Yeah. It's like, you troubler of Israel. And Elijah says, I haven't troubled Israel. You've troubled Israel. And then you have Mount Carmel and all that happening. Granted, Elijah wasn't dying there. But nonetheless, you know how Ahab felt about Elijah. And here this fella is, and while he is described as evil, he's weeping over Elisha. And there's something to be said for that, I suppose. Yeah, go ahead, Shirley. Maybe. Yeah, he might have. And it's just odd to me that someone who's described as evil could still be tender-hearted on some level, but nonetheless, I guess it's possible, because this guy may be a very good example of it. And it's just interesting. So I also think Elisha's interesting because Elisha is serving as prophet in the place of whom? Elijah. Now, what happened to Elijah at the end of his life? Right? He's taken up. So I wonder if Elisha was wondering whether or not the chariots would come for him too. And the answer is, nope, and he is sick with the sickness of which he would die. Talking with someone recently, and I'll go ahead and tell you who it was, because it was Brandon. So those of you who know Brandon's history, you know everything he's dealt with personally, right, concerning his kidneys. His dad passed away. How old would he have been when his dad passed? How long ago was it? Do you know?
Early, like a teenager,
Okay.
13 maybe.
Okay. So maybe 10 to 15 years ago, somewhere in that window. So Brandon was asking me basically, why do some people who you would think would die live, and some people who you think should live die? That question.
Not up to us.
Yeah. And, why is Elijah taken up and Elisha's not? Why in prison does the Lord allow James to be beheaded and yet Peter is rescued? And on some level, time and chance happen to all men, and on another level, it's God's will. And it's thus saith the Lord, It's you just imagine Elisha, and it's, there Elijah was saying, I'm no better than my fathers, take my life. And he ends up, the Lord takes him up. But Elisha, not on too much of a tangent, but do you remember before Elijah does go up to heaven, do you remember what Elisha asks for? Go ahead, Bruce.
Double portion of his spirit.
A double portion of his spirit. Do you remember when James and John asked to sit one on the left, one on the right, and what the Lord's response wasn't his to give? But doesn't he also say in one of the accounts there, to paraphrase it, do you know what you're asking for? Something along those. He says, are you able to be baptized with baptism? And he's talking about the suffering. And it's like, you sure you know what you're asking for? And I wonder, I parallel that to Elisha when Elisha says double portion. And it's like, you sure you know what you're asking for? I read in one of the commentators that it looks like Elisha may have prophesied for about 50 to 55 years. And it's like, whoo. And that was a dark time in Israel. Anyway, just something to think about. So he's sick with the sickness that he's going to die from, and then you have this conversation. And so he tells, go ahead, Mark.
As far as the king crying, I saw a comment here that they thought perhaps Joash is pretty much worried he's on the verge of defeat. And it could be, because right away they're talking about the arrows and all this, and that Syria is going to be made an end of.
Yeah.
And he says, my father, the chariots of Israel's horsemen, and he got 10 chariots, maybe 50 horsemen. I got a problem here.
If an enemy strikes now, we're not in the best defensive position. Yeah. Which I wonder about him saying the chariots of Israel and their horsemen. What does he mean by that comment? Because we know where that showed up before, and that's earlier in Elisha's life when the Syrians have surrounded that city, and Elisha's servant says, what are we going to do? And Elisha prays, and it's kind of an interesting account. Elisha prays that the Lord would open up his servant's eyes. And when the servant opens his eyes up, what does he see? It's like all the chariots of the Lord surrounding the Syrians. What's the message the Lord wanted him to understand? It's like, I give the word, and those Syrians will be like the dust at the threshing floor. One of the upcoming daily videos talking about that, and you get a little nugget of it. When Peter draws his sword in the garden, And Jesus says, don't you know I could call the angels? If the veil would have been lifted, because that's what happened with Elisha's servant. The veil is lifted just for a moment, and all of a sudden it's like, whoa. When Elisha says, there's more of us than them, don't worry about it. If when Peter says that, if the veil would have been lifted just a little bit, and if Peter could have seen all the host of heaven standing at attention, just saying, you give the word and we'll come. Do you think Peter would have still been afraid? No. It's like, so here with, I wonder if this king is referring back to that account with Elisha and his servant. Effectively, we're surrounded. And anyway, just something to think about. So then you have the conversation, and Elisha says, take your bow and arrow, right? And he puts his hand on him, things along those lines. And then he says, strike the ground. And what's the guy do? Strikes it 3 times. And Elisha gets mad. And Elisha's like, you should have done it 5 or 6 times. But because you only did it 3 times, you're only going to strike Syria 3 times now. You would have wiped him out, but now you're not going to. If you're the king, what would you be thinking at that point?
Why didn't you show them?
Right.
How many times?
Yeah.
Not a mind reader.
He could have struck it once.
Yeah,
He
I
would
know.
have done what he said.
I know. I don't know what to say about it. And it's like, I didn't realize that was the point of me striking the ground. I didn't know that was going to correlate to whether or not we were going to defeat the Syrians or not.
I was striking about 30 times.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like you're kind of giving me odd orders here. You want me to shoot an arrow out the window. Someone's got to go pick that arrow up, and you want me to hit the ground. It's like, oh, okay. And it is what it is. I don't really know what to make of it too much, other than, and it just popped into my pea brain. When Samuel killed Agag, how did he kill him? Do what, Brenda?
He struck him and chopped him up to pieces.
Yeah, he hacked him to bits. He didn't hit him just once. He kept hitting him. In my mind, I was thinking of, when you're watching a movie and the good guy is pummeling the fire out of the bad guy until finally someone says, get off of him. He's dead already. That's what Elisha wanted the king to do. It's like, and anyway, but nonetheless, I'm sort of like y'all. It's like, if you would have told me, I would have done this. So anyway, so you would like to think that's the weirdest thing that happens. That's not the weirdest thing that happens. So then Elisha dies, they bury him, and then raiding bands from Moab invade the land in the spring of the year. Why do you think Moab's invading? They only got 10 chariots. Of course they're going to start being invaded by others. So it was, though, as they were burying a man. Okay, so Moab's invading in the land in the spring of the year. So raiding bands from Moab come in, verse 21. So it was as they were burying a man. So there's a funeral procession, right? There's a funeral. They're burying someone. Suddenly they spied a band of raiders, and they put the man in the tomb of Elisha. So here they are. They're burying a guy, probably trying to do it very respectfully, very being kind for, in remembrance of the dead. And all of a sudden these raiders show up, and what do they got to do? Chuck him in real quick. And so they throw this dead guy in, and when the dead guy touches the bones of Elisha, what happens? And then verse 22, and Hazael, king of it, and then it just moves on. And so the question. What's the question?
What was the purpose of him coming?
What's the purpose? What's the point of this? Any thoughts on that?
Just showing God's power.
Showing God's power. It might go back to what Mark was talking about, because the king is real worried. And it's like, they're almost dead. And with the power of the Lord, what can happen? The dead can come back to life. That might be a part of it. to assure them that the Lord the Lord is still there. And another part of it may also be these people needed to respect Elisha, namely what Elisha taught. You know, what was the whole purpose of the miracles in the New Testament? Like you're confirming the word. So it's like, yes, Elisha died. If you think his word died with him, you would be wrong. It's like the word does not die. So that may be another aspect of it. But I'll tell you right now, the commentators who talk about this, they talk about how bizarre it is. Because they think this might be the only miracle where the person who's involved, namely Elisha, is dead. And it's odd. And it would be real easy, you know, and you think about that. One of the commentators, let me look at the time. Most of the commentators, Matthew Henry, Adam Clark, some of the others, you know, they're all Protestants, right? Okay, they're all Protestants. So who do the Protestants protest? They're protesting Catholics. Now, those of you who know, it's like, and the commentators refer to this because the Catholics did something for a long time with the selling of indulgences and different things and stuff like that. And they would go around, and what were they selling? They were selling they were selling bones of the apostles. And it's like for $99.95, you could have, you know, for $99.95, you could have John the Baptist. Mark Twain, actually, it was so ridiculous. Mark Twain wrote about it. I don't know if this was real or not, because all these different monasteries would have these things that they claim to be relics, right? And that's relics of whoever. One of them claimed to have John the Baptist's skull as a child, and another one claimed to have John the Baptist's skull as an adult. And Mark Twain was like, doesn't get much more ridiculous than that. And so they were selling holy relics, frankly, to pay for St. Peter's Basilica and other things. And so the commentators refer to that in talking about this, and that this miracle was so peculiar because all the dead man touches is what? His bones. Now, the bottom line is, were they magic bones? It's like, no, this is the power of God. In the same way, in the New Testament, you know, when it talks about strange miracles being done, and it doesn't talk about that if just a handkerchief was brought from Peter, or was it from Paul? Whichever one it was, and it was like, and it makes the point, it's like the miracles were weird enough. And then it's like, these miracles, that's like, they were bizarre, you know, it's like, it's odd. It wasn't a magic handkerchief. It's like, no, it's the power of God. Any comments or questions or anything?
Well, they said it was also the people would wait for the apostles to go by.
Yeah, like
the shadow.
Like the shadow.
They were hoping to cure whatever they had.
Does that mean they were all like lingering at sunset when they threw a longer shadow? It's like, it's, you know, and it's just stuff like that. It's like, it's the power of God. It's odd, but it's the power of God. And here that's what it is as well. Another miracle sort of like that is when the angel would come down and stir the waters. And it's like, okay. Here it's like, all right, it's the power of God. So, all right, to read on. And Hazael, king of Syria. So remember that whole business with the hitting the ground. That's okay. You're going to defeat Syria 3 times. That's it. So Hazael, king of Syria, oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz. Right? That verse is why the commentators think back in verses 1 through 9, because that's Jehoahaz. They think that's why when Jehoahaz pleads with the Lord and the Lord shows mercy, that's why they think it actually happened in his son's time and not in his time. Because the verse clearly says, Hazael, king of Syria, oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz. Make of that whatever you want to. The Lord was gracious to them, and this is what I wanted you to key in on. But the Lord was gracious to them, had compassion on them, and regarded them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not yet destroy them or cast them from his presence. The bottom line is, when the Lord shows us kindness, ultimately it's because of who? It's because of Jesus. It doesn't mean that the Lord doesn't appreciate us and our doing what he wants us to do, but ultimately Jesus is the propitiation. He's the satisfaction. Not our own good deeds are not the propitiation. And here it's like, okay, this fellow Jehoash, he strikes Syria 3 times, and the Lord is with him, but the Lord has compassion on them because of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because of the covenant made with them, and he remembers the covenant. And so he remembers the covenant and would not yet destroy them or cast them from his presence. Now Hazael, king of Syria, died. Then Ben-Hadad, his son, reigned in his place. And Jehoash, the son of Jehoahaz, recaptured from the hand of Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, the cities which he had taken out of the hand of Jehoahaz, his father, by war. 3 times Joash defeated him and recaptured the cities of Israel, just like Elisha said. You're going to beat him 3 times. If he would have struck the ground 5 or 6 times, well, he would have whooped him even worse. Okay, so that's Jehoash. Any questions or comments? Okay, so in the midst of Jehoash's reign, you have the reign of Amaziah. And we only have we have 3 or 4 minutes left. And so that's going to come from 2 Chronicles 25. We won't read it. We'll read it next week just for time's sake. But if you want to turn over there, I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. And so Amaziah reigns in Judah. One of the first things that he does, to look at verse 3, as soon as the kingdom was established for him, he executes his servants who had murdered his father, the king. Right? So that was, his father was Joash. So remember, Joash does good. Joash, his father, so we're back down south again, he's the guy who did good the entire life of the priest. Then they go off into idolatry. God sends a prophet, and that's Jehoiada's son, the priest's son. They kill him. But then the way that ends, when you look back at chapter 24, at verse 20, that's where the Spirit of God came upon Zechariah. Why do you transgress the commandments of the Lord? Verse 21, they conspired against him. They stoned him. And then verse 23 on, in the spring of that year, Syria comes against them. They wounded him, verse 25, and his own servants conspired against him to kill him. And it's a little bit of a, I'm not sure you would say it was a coup because they didn't want to be in power, but his own servants killed him. It's like, what do you think his son is going to do when he comes into power? If you're responsible for killing his father, what do you think the next king, Amaziah, is going to do when his, as it says, as soon as his kingdom was established, what's his first order? It's like, execute those men who killed my father. It's like he was wounded by the Syrians, but it was his own servants that killed him. And it's, you might just think about, this is sort of like what is said about adulterers. If a fellow will cheat with you, what else will he do? If he'll cheat with you, he'll cheat on you. He has no loyalty. If, someone's a Benedict Arnold, if they'll betray their government, if they'll betray one government, what will they do? They'll betray other governments. These servants, if they conspired to kill one king, what could they do? And so therefore, what's the order? Off with their heads. And that's the first thing that he does. The next part of the chapter, they go to war against Edom. And the reason they go to war against Edom is because the Edomites had finally cast them off and they were not serving them anymore. And they had grown stronger and stronger and more defiant. So now Amaziah is going to lead Israel against the Edomites. And remember, this is the king of Judah. And of all the things he does as the king of Judah, he gathers and there's all sorts of people. There's all sorts of soldiers. He counts them all out, and it's 100,000 mighty men of valor. He numbered them, verse 5, from Judah. He numbered them 20 years old and above and found them to be about 300,000 choice men able to go to war who could handle spear and shield. But he also hired 100,000 mighty men of valor from Israel for 100 talents of silver. So who's he hiring? Mercenaries. And then the man of God says, you're not supposed to do that. Israel's not following the Lord. That's a bad idea. And Amaziah says, yeah, but I've already paid him the money. And the man of God says, I don't care. Thus saith the Lord, don't do that. And so we'll talk about that next week, because what ends up happening is Amaziah does send them away, and they don't really go away. For some reason, even though they got paid, well, to a hammer, what does everything look like? And these guys are probably a bunch of bloodthirsty rogues. And so when Amaziah says, we're not going to need your assistance, keep the money though, and they end up attacking Judah. So anyway, we'll read that account next week. So anyway, mind just think about different applications that we might make, and we'll stop there and we'll pick up talking about Amaziah 2 weeks. Next week is singing night. So 2 weeks from tonight, Amaziah. Appreciate y'all's attention this evening.